So I would like to start with the questions that has been placed in the Slido, and I would start with those that has got the most likes. The first question is, hello, Vasya, you're welcome to join. Thank you for bringing the microphones. The question is, the European funds goes actually to the wide range of the projects, but does DALNA have a capacity to monitor all of them, or just there is some selection of process which ones are to be monitored, and is there, and what's the choice? So maybe, yeah, who's grab the mic, and you're welcome. It's going to be switched on. Yep.
No, it. Yeah. Okay. Of course, the EU fund project, different type of the projects, construction works, supplies, services. I would say the most attention should be paid to the construction works because it's honestly speaking, it is mostly corrupted area, and it's a very specific area, especially when we come to the tender procedures, and then also during the implementation of the works, where all the modifications is done not on, let's say, to the interests of the municipality, for example, but mostly to the interest, or more to the interest of the builders, construction company, so that I would strongly suggest to the to work with the complex works contracts. And what we also do, we pay most attention to construction works.
Do you have the same shape or just the method for choosing the projects to monitor, as well as in other countries all across Europe? Because we've listed 11 countries from the EU altogether, so who would like to start?
Well, our project was actually selected on the tender. We did not choose it ourselves. So we just got what we received, what we got, and then planned accordingly.
Yeah, Lena?
I think it's important that we don't engage in this process, but that this decision is made by the central government on what you see, what you choose, where you need more oversight and safeguarding, and then we just keep our independence as monitors.
The next question has been passed in Latvian, so I'll quote as it is. Pilsoniskā sabiedrība un nevalstiskās organizācijas neuztver DALNU kā uzticamu sabiedrības pārstāvi. Līdz ar to viens no galvenajiem Integrity Pact, vai šī godīguma vai taisnīguma pakta mērķiem īsti netika sasniegts. Kā būs ar šo turpmāk, un jautājums, tā teikt, finansējums Integrity Pactam iepratīm uzticībai. Te ir tāda kritiska nocieskanas, es nezinu, kurš no auditorijas ir domājis, tā teikt, sabiedrības uzticamu pārstāvi, bet iespējams, ka ar to ir nācies saskarties, Lena.
So what I said at the beginning, that we see what results we see, and we see that we can increase transparency, but increased transparency not always directly translates into trust, at least not in the short term. But one of the challenges was the opposition from society, and it was not actually, in my opinion, it was not our fault. We were not engaged in the first phase of the project, how it was chosen, what public discussions there were. So we decided that to keep our independence, we would not engage in any other activities apart from monitoring the implementation of the project. And we really focused on that. We probably, what I didn't mention, but I should have mentioned, was that one of the areas where we saw that we need to think more carefully and more in depth and prepare more is communication, the public communication and communication with communities. And we need to have, I think for all IPs, you really need to have a very comprehensive communications plan and risk mitigation plan, and really to take those two very, very seriously and to prepare from the start and to find this communication with communities. We did to engage, for example, the Friends of the Great Cemetery and other groups when we started, when these discussions started. but our activities were actually not very successful, and this is a lesson we should learn, and probably our partners should learn for future, that if you have this opposition from some groups, it's harder, and we need to think how to clarify, how to raise awareness about the role of the monitor and what are the limitations which we can't step outside of which.
Thank you. Ivan, actually,
Can I just
yes,
add one thing?
Okay.
Yeah, about the selection of the projects, something to share with you is that there was, at the beginning of the project, there was like a public call where member states and managing authorities were applying to be tested for the Integrity Pact. And then there was a joint selection with the European Commission on what projects to monitor. So this was the pilot, and then out of this, then it will be, the result will be more informed decisions for the future, or where the integrity pacts cannot be applied.
If you take a look at 10 or 11 European Union countries, actually, what you would like to mention, what was the most positive things that has worked well, and do you have a reason behind why it's so successfully so far?
So I would say that these projects, I always say it's 18 projects in one, because every integrity pact has specific problems or mechanisms that we had to firstly understand. So I would say it's also, we are now talking with the partnership on how to measure success of an IP. Is it when you find something, or is it when everything goes smooth, So we had, and I also would like to share with this audience that things go also differently, that here it was really a bumpy road. It was, the IP here was very heated, was very controversial, but usually out of all the 18 IPs, this is the only one with such a high level of complexity. So in most of cases, we have managed, like in Slovenia, it's a good case, they have established a very solid collaboration with bidders and the contracting authority and the managing authority. And it has to be seen more of like a collaborative tool, not like that. The aim of the monitors is to block everything, and just to waste European money. So yeah, so this is some learnings that it cannot be applied to all the countries, but we see that under specific preconditions, the IP does work.
Would you add anything to that, or yes? I didn't want to give the impression that everything was really smooth. In Slovenia, of course, there were some questions asked, there were some things, but as Ivan pointed out, integrity pacts can act as a real-time audit. So basically, we can fix the mistakes before they happen, but we just need the information. So this is one of the best aspects of this tool. And one thing that I forgot to mention in my presentation is that the internal government audit office actually found no irregularities on the audit of the first project. So that for us was a huge success. The other huge success was that there was no financial amendments or annexes signed to increase the value of the contract. So basically we had 2.5 million and it was all spent, and apparently it was spent in a good way. So it was not all wow, but it just, as Ivan said, it's more of like establishing a good trust, a good relationship. So it's not only formal emails going around, but you can sit down and have a really good conversation, open conversation with bidders, with user organizations. And apparently, because I have not been involved in a construction sector at all in my life, that our coordination meetings during the on-site monitoring are very calm, very organized. And apparently in some other construction projects, things can even amount to threats or almost fighting. So this was one of the roles that was pointed out by the contracting authority and the bidders themselves, that it's useful to have us there so that we are, because we're independent and I make simultaneous minutes, so we can always check who said something and then resolve the possible dispute even before it escalates.
Just turning back to the local level as well, the question from the audience is actually, in general, within the monitoring of the infrastructure projects, there are some 7 or 8 public institutions already involved. Does it mean that if you would like to include it even more within Integrity Pact and just to involve the NGOs within a monitoring, does it mean that all those public institutions' work is not so effective or quite efficient? Yeah.
No, not at all. What is the difference? The difference is that the controlling institutions, they do the control sometimes on risk-based control. This is one thing. Not 100% of checks of all the procurements, all the projects, etc. This is one aspect. Another aspect is that not all the checking or controlling is going so-called ex ante. So before it happens, before the procurement is done, before the tender documentation is ready, etc., etc. So this is the field where the DALNA can assist us as a contracting authority, I mean the controlling authority in your terms, stepping in just at the beginning of the process. So then it's, again, avoiding of irregularities at the source of the, let's say, a source of, yes, occurrence, exactly. So that's, that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we have, I think public procurement in Latvia amounts to some 40% of our national budget. And we have procurement monitoring office, which has a staff of, I think, 100 people, maybe less, maybe 40. So they cannot monitor all this amount, and this is why the involvement of citizens, it's really important. And as Solid described, it's the early warning possibility that we can actually help to prevent, for example, waste of 100 million euro.
I would extend that question to the State Audit Office, actually. Wouldn't it be enough with the resolution from the State Audit Office, and maybe it's quite enough with that? Tātad jautājums ir par to, kā tas latviski uzdots, vai un kāpēc neatkarīgs valsts kontrolas rīcība un pierādījumos balstīts vērtējums ir nepietiekams infrastruktūras projektu uzraudzībā. Sorry, just not translating it at a full, but the question is.
And the very simple answer is the State Audit Office does post factum. So that means they auditing specific institutions, and they have the specific audits, and not always while auditing of specific institution, they check also procurement. So that means it's as a post factum or ex ante. So we better avoid than deal with the consequences.
And the question is, I don't know to whom it should be asked, but did you have a change management or communication strategies to manage the organizational resistance, or did you go just in blind and hope for the best? That also comes from the audience.
No, in our case, of course, we and also even can assure you that we have constant, first of all, we have project management from Transparency Secretariat in Berlin, and we have very close communication and assistance. And this happened also, and I want to thank you for your assistance during the first stages, especially of our very complicated problems, and which were mostly really due to communication issues and how to address certain interest groups in society. But of course, we reviewed the risks and also our strategy systemically, regularly, and you know, made changes to the flow of activities, and also, as I showed at the beginning, the timeline. We were hoping to finish monitoring activities by the end of 2019 in all of the countries, right? But now, you know, the projects are delayed, and the timeline has extended to 2023 now. And these things happen, and of course you have to be very, very flexible. And we also highlighted some of the problems that the teams change in TI chapters, in public institutions. So these are also some of the challenges that we need to take into consideration when planning for future.
And I would also like to add that once the word got out, of course, everybody were aware that TI Slovenia is doing integrity packs in the field of health. for Ministry of Health, then everybody's expectations went up that we were going to solve all the alleged corruption problems in health sector. But we just have to stick. However, we actually get a lot of information just from the fact that we're involved in that. So that, and of course, we've also been identified as potential partners in other projects. But there's a problem because if you're not involved from the needs assessment phase, then you're not really aware of what's been going on before. So because of the reputation is everything, especially for TI, then we have to be really careful at choosing for the future projects which would be outside this project of with European Commission. I hope we get it, but it's important that we know what's been going on. We cannot just jump into the implementation phase because maybe there's been some serious irregularities already in the tender documentation phase or stuff like that. So it's important to take it slowly.
Actually, all of you also mentioned the citizen involvement or the community's involvement in the monitoring the large infrastructure projects. What is your evaluation? Was the Integrity Pact as a trigger or the agent for wider citizen engagement in, I don't know, public procurements and everything that we wanted to achieve? What is your evaluation?
So that's a good question. So I think the first remarkable result is that citizen engagement is possible in public procurement, which is...
it's always possible to be better.
Yeah, of course. There's always possibility to improve. So initially the citizen engagement, that's interesting because initially the citizen engagement part is not, it was not a pillar of the existing IP model. And the monitors in devising their strategy on the national level, some have chosen for a more intensive capacity building inclusion, citizen engagement inclusion, others for a more, let's say, awareness raising. So it also depends on the national context, on the type of the contract as well. But let's say that what we have learned from this project is that it is possible to engage citizens, that the role of the monitor, it's crucial, basically. We cannot expect the public authorities to do the type of engagement that we have achieved in the project. It's also a lot of work. It's about understanding the local context, getting to know the communities, and to letting the citizen understand the path or the way they want to be involved. For example, in the south of Italy, our monitors, they have talked to the affected community, and they have, for example, the elderly population, they have decided not to be actively involved in the monitoring, but to support the younger people in the development of the skills that is needed for the monitoring. But let me just, because I think this is quite impressive, you know. I have here the, let me see if I find it. Yeah, so it's a lot of work, you know. For example, in Italy, what our monitors have done, they have educated citizens on public contracting. They have taken them on field visits to see the locations of both projects. They have guided them on how to judge whether a public contract is clean and what red flags to look. They have arranged for direct meetings between citizens and government officials to discuss the process. They have identified 300 local contacts who are interested in monitoring the public contracting, spent a whole week in the field meeting with people to explain the projects, and spent several hours on the phone conversing with interested people. So as you see, it's a very complex process. We don't see that the public administration doing this, but the monitors were, I think, very well placed to take that role.
What about Slovenia, Latvia? What's your comment on that?
Well, first we did the local stakeholder mapping, who are the relevant CSOs, the relevant institutions, schools, mentioned police, fire department, anybody who has a remote possibility to use the services of this hospital in the future. So then we organized the workshop and the presentation, and we didn't go as deep as the Italians did, because there's of course also safety regulations for construction yard. You cannot just walk into a construction yard, you have to be signed in, you have to have a helmet. So we basically just wanted to inform the public that we're doing this, that this is possible, and how they can also participate in this monitoring, and we plan to replicate all of this in Novo Mesto. So we're doing it in sort of like middle. If the Italians were high level of citizen engagements, I would rate us somewhere in the middle. And of course, with the lessons learned from the first hospital, we plan to up this a little bit. But there's another aspect. I mentioned the ALAC, the line that we have for reporting irregularities, and through this reporting, and I cannot be more specific because there's anonymous and confidential processes, but we had good information coming from people who just saw that we put these visibility posters, and they just decided to call us. So we gained, this is I think also a good aspect.
Okay, and what we've seen in Riga and Latvia?
No, we were like, Italy was high, you were middle, we were low, mostly because we didn't get to construction phase. We had planned to engage citizens when the construction phase would start, but where the procurements were cancelled and cancelled again and started again. So we tried to reach out to some of the community, some of the interest groups, as I said, that were campaigning mostly against the project as such. To explain them our role and how, you know, and listen to their concerns. And but regarding, yeah, we tried to do some knowledge transfer. We tried to build capacity of some of the activists, maybe not necessarily established NGOs in the regions, so that they in future could engage in monitoring activities, and we will continue such efforts. And we're very proud that actually the IP is now included in the next Open Government Partnership Plan, and we will hear about this late in the next session. And if this can be really piloted in municipalities, then we probably have some more work to do with our regional partners. But regarding the whistleblowing systems, I really agree that this can be an effective instrument, and it has been also so in some other of the participating countries, I think in Poland. And what we also tried to raise awareness in Riga city traffic about the whistleblowing systems and maybe some other reporting systems for bidders, for participants in public procurement, how they could identify some suspicious cases or some risks. At the moment, I'm not sure at what stage any of these systems are. Maybe there are something on the paper, but how it really works, we haven't been involved in that or any discussions. So they were not very cooperative or interested in those things. But we are working on whistleblowing, as you mentioned also that we should focus maybe more. We have done this also in 2019 to educate, to build capacity of public sector officials, and also extensively on the private sector, because we have obligation for all private companies that have 50 or more employees to also have internal whistleblowing channels. And I can advertise a conference we will have on 26th of March here in Riga, also with some international speakers and the whistleblowers themselves. So please check out our website for more information on that.
Solita, I would like to ask you, actually, what was the main benefit of the Dal's involvement within the process regarding the Riga city traffic and so? And do you see any added value to the process when the independent partner from outside would join the team? And do you see it was helpful, or to be honest, vice versa?
I will go one step back to continue previous communication on the whistleblowing. I can share the experience, what we have in the management of more than 1,000 projects at this time by the CFCA. When the construction works or the implementation is active, then the whistleblowing starts. So the people want to see the real results. They are very keen to see and have their own opinion about the works, the quality of works and other things. So unfortunately for Riga City traffic projects, we haven't got so far, but I would be 100% sure that all the whistleblowing and the public interest will start immediately because it was really sensitive project. So this is one side. And another side, yes, so of course I already mentioned, probably not so clearly in Latvian, that we have to say thank you to Dauna. Because for the part when we started together to work in the, let's say, ex-ante evaluation of procurement documents and also the communication, I would say that Dauna did their job. But of course, then again, still we were expecting more profound, more professional input from the experts in the evaluation technical specifications. But still, yes, the work was done. If I speak about the controlling obligations of the management verifications and the financial expenditures for the project, I'm not talking about the public engagement. This is not my specialty, let's say. Yeah.
But how can you assume that actually there was a vox populi? Dauna was the person on behalf of the society just going public to communicate with the issue, and how it looks like when it turns to you, because sometimes we would like to just keep it in pace and to have some status quo and okay, let's decide at the first and then do everything. But the public communication actually is a quite important string to play.
Exactly, I totally agree. And we, as a controlling institution, we kept our eyes and ears all the time open. So that means we somehow filtrated all the information, what we received from the communication between the Dauna and community and different actors. We transported this knowledge to the level of our controlling environment. So we've seen whether we have some problems also in the corruption, reported if required to the specific institutions and so on. So that means, of course, it wasn't very technical what we are dealing with, for example, the procurement procedures or so on, but it gave us an impression what is going on, what is the environment. Let's say that we had some kind of impression of a due diligence check, what happens in this utility. So this is that was really a big plus for us. Yeah.
We are talking about a bit less than 100 million euros in Latvia for the Riga City traffic project with the tram line. Altogether, we have almost €1 billion in 11 countries all across Europe. And the question is, if there is a billion worth industry behind that, is it the healthcare or infrastructure or anything else? Even do you see that Transparency International, the regional and country units, has enough resource and the capacity just to monitor, to follow up all the infrastructure projects or the projects at such a big scale? Is the Transparency International probably the sole organization, the NGO that should take care of that, or just we need to include more partners within monitoring those?
No, I mean, the answer is no, we don't have all the capacity.
No, okay.
No, I mean, we have also our private life, so. No, so what's important to stress is that this is, it's a tool that was designed by the Transparency International, but it's a fully open source tool, so we don't own the proper rights, we have the initial ideas. To truth being said, also in this project we have also non-Transparency International organizations who are doing an excellent job. So we would like, of course, to have more CSOs taking over the ownership of the model, to also improve it if possible. For example, we are currently, there is already in Italy Parliament Integrity Watch. They are also already in the process of picking our learnings and doing independently based on our model, new integrity pacts. So it is something to bear in mind when for the new multi-annual financial framework, that depending on the type of and size of monitor projects, there needs to be a counterbalanced monitoring. And also the financial part is quite important, and it has to be flexible, because as we've seen of these 18 monitor projects, I think 90% they have suffered delays. So there cannot be a break between one set stage and the other.
I also would like to ask, actually, what was the first reaction or the first sayings from the private sector companies that needed to sign an integrity pact? What did the... Yeah.
I gave the presentation at Slovenia's Business Integrity Forum, which is part of TI Slovenia. And when I finished the presentation...
Yeah, but one thing is just to be seated in a forum, and it sounds good. Yeah.
Listen, when I finished the presentation, a director of a big energy company came to me, and he did like this and said, "I want you to sell me this pact." So in the last year, we've been having negotiations, because they're a state-owned energy company, and they also have procurement procedures funded by European Union. So this was for us a big confirmation that this model is also appropriate for public sector, even if it's state-owned, which is of course some speciality of transitional countries. But I think we can actually expand this, because also the business sector, the private sector, they demand more transparency. Especially, I remember TI Lithuania did one pager, and the first thing when they did a survey amongst the business partners was that the business people are scared of leaking information from contracting authorities to their competition. So I think the business sector has a legitimate interest in having public procurement procedures more transparent, and if they see integrity pacts as one of the models that they can ensure more transparency and preventing corruption, this is why they are interested. So we are working also on this model to have, but there's always a problem, because you need to have an independent financing source. Otherwise, if you are paid by the same company that you are supposed to be monitoring, there's always a risk that you will find something that you will not like, and then we say we're cutting your funding. So this is one of the aspects that has to be considered. Otherwise, you can really damage your reputation and cannot recover.
And I also would like to spend some minutes left on the future of the integrity pacts within the European Union. Actually, how could the integrity pacts could be used just apart from the European Union level? Probably could they be funded by the central governments or municipalities or local authorities? What's your outlook for that?
They have integrity pacts in India. There was a huge helicopter scandal. They have integrity pacts, I think, in Mexico. They have integrity pacts in Rwanda for the past 7 years. So it's not a new concept. It's just the difference between the development stages of countries, and then basically from what I heard when a colleague from Rwanda gave us presentation, the citizen engagement level in there is really high. At the end of the evening, everybody in the village came to see what was done and how the quality of the pavement was, and they called that there some people were taking away the material from the construction yard. I think that's something that you cannot realistically expect in Europe to be at that point. But yes, integrity pacts, they're used worldwide, globally, and I think the future of integrity pacts, well, this is personally speaking, I would like from this pilot project to become a program.
Okay. Who else would like to add? Because we have some cross-border projects probably to be monitored, as I mentioned, from one rails to another. So Rail Baltic, for example.
Yeah, I wanted to mention Rail Baltic also. I don't know if we have somebody in the audience here today. Probably we have. We have been in communication also with Rail Baltica, and discussed possibility to include the Integrity Pact. But there haven't been anything very specific discussed. We had the conference in December where Baiba Rubista, the former chief executive officer of Rail Baltica said that, you know, there are a lot of complications regarding language barriers, legal barriers, and some other setbacks, but also the governance structure of the project itself and how decisions have to be made. But of course, this is also one of the probably very risky projects, if I may say so, and would benefit from citizen oversight. The question is how we could organize and what model we could apply to that. And in general, we only signed one IP with bidders in Latvia. I don't think that there was any specific problems or any attitude problems from them. But we have also spoken with private sector, and in general, the companies that want to see a fairer competition in Latvia. We are a very small market, very small country. And sometimes the private sector also are very, I mean, I would say not sometimes, but also the private sector is maybe more skeptical of the level of corruption risks or conflict of interest risks regarding public procurement. And this is, we can see this also in the, you know, statistics in the public opinion survey data. And that's why I think that the private sector would not be a problem. It would be more whether the municipalities or the contracting agencies, and with contracting agencies I mean city traffic or any institution that would implement such integrity pact. So if they are willing to engage.
Yep. Is there any comments on that?
Just a small note. Of course, in the EU funds management system, I would say not, definitely not. Of course, we can continue and so on. But then as coming from the financial sector, if we speak about the funding, then we have to think about the cost of the proper assessment, proper monitoring by Dauna. And then if we have already funding allocated for the controlling of the EU funds, we have to think about the efficiency of the money itself. So,
okay,
I would agree. I think Ivan was very clear about that monitoring such as this has its cost. It's not for free. So basically, I think in the future we will have to, European Union will have to evaluate really good the lessons learned on this pilot project, on where are the focuses and where this is rational. So.
Okay, Ivan, yes.
Yeah, but just
you're about to finish actually in some extent. So
exactly. Yes.
You're quite close to the final remarks within the first panel.
Each one says a sentence. Yes, it's costly, but if you look at, for example, a big and complex construction or a big contract, then the percentage that is spent on monitoring clearly outweighs the potential benefits, you know? So I think if you think about the possible waste of money and how much would then be allocated to monitoring, I think there's no question there that it is a viable option.
Actually, right now, I have to say that thank you, panelists, for being with us and joining the discussion. Of course, there are a lot of questions that has been popping up within a Slido. But of course, someone from the kitchen would call me in saying that the lunch is ready. Sorry?
We can talk in the break.
Yes, and you can talk in a break. And actually, the questions that you passed to the panelists, you can freely ask in an informal atmosphere. Otherwise, I would like to say thank you once again and welcome everyone to the lunchtime. And thank you. Yes, if you're making applause, then do it loud. Yeah.